The Boston of today. Such was Boston in the past, such were its founders, such were the foundations that these great and good men laid. How wonderful in contrast is the scene today. In colonial times, Boston embraced a peninsula of 690 acres. The peninsula has vanished. 1,700 acres were acquired by the city when South Boston and East Boston were added to its area. 10,100 when Roxbury and West Roxbury were annexed. 4,800 when the Gardens of Beautiful Dorchester were received. Today, the area of Boston is more than 20,000 acres. Bridges span its rivers on every hand. Its suburbs are among the most lovely in the world. In 1790, Boston had a population of something more than 18,000. In 1800, of 24,000. In 1820, of 43,000. In 1840, of 93,000. In 1850, of 136,000. In 1860, of 177,000. And in 1870, after the annexation of Roxbury in 1867 and of Dorchester in 1869, of 250,000. The annexation of Charlestown, West Roxbury, and Brighton added greatly to the population, and today, 1881, Boston contains about 370,000 souls. We said the peninsula had vanished. The neck of it has been broadened into a wide and populous area, and where the high tides once washed the sands, the finest private residences now stand. Over the old flats or Charles River marshes, Commonwealth Avenue now stretches more than a mile in length and 240 feet wide. The old salt meadows are grand squares. The very hills have been lowered to push away the embouchures of the Charles. The city has nearly 30,000 buildings. Over it shines the gilded dome of the State House on Beacon Hill. This building was commenced in Governor Hancock's pasture in 1789. From the dome, which is open to the public, the harbor with its 50 islands, the blue hills of Milton, and an immense extent of country full of elegant houses with clustering spires and towers may be seen. In the Doric Hall or Rotunda are many historic relics and beautiful busts and statues. The valuation of Boston in 1800 was a little more than $15 million. In 1870, it was nearly $600 million. In 1840, the average amount of property to each inhabitant was less than $900. Today, it is nearly $2,500. Boston is one of the richest cities in the world. It was a town of churches at the beginning. It has now 150 regular churches and some 200 religious societies. The Puritans esteemed education next to religion and provided the best schools for their children. The schools in Boston numbered nearly 400. They are the best in the country, and the free public school buildings are the finest ever erected. Harvard University is the leading college of America. The music schools of Boston are the best in the country, and one of them is the largest in the world. In 1852, Joshua Bates, whose bust may be seen in Bates Hall, offered the city $50,000 for the purchase of books if a suitable library were provided. The offer was accepted, and thus began the Boston Public Library on Boylston Street. The library now contains nearly 400,000 volumes and is next to the Library of Congress, the largest in the country, and in point of value, one of the best in America. When the Puritans came to Boston, it was because of the healthful springs of water on the peninsula. The fountains that welled up from the earth, where is now Louisburg Square, with its odd figures of Columbus and Aristides, have disappeared, long ago drawn away by the overdemand on their hidden sources. The spring near Governor Winthrop's old residence, where now is Dark Spring Lane beyond the Old South Church, around whose pump the women used to gossip in Anne Hutchinson's time, is also gone. But Boston is a place of pure water, now as of old. In 1848, while Josiah Quincy Jr. was mayor, water was successfully introduced into the city from Lake Cochituate, 20 miles distant. The lake covers 650 acres. It was arranged that this water should be brought in a brick conduit 11 miles long to a grand reservoir in Brookline, and thence to distributing reservoirs in Boston, East Boston, South Boston, and the Highlands. The principal reservoir in Brookline covers 23 acres. In 1869, a standpipe was erected in Roxbury by means of which pure water is supplied to the highest levels of the city houses. In 1869, after the settlement of the issues of the war, a great musical festival called the Peace Jubilee was held in Boston in a coliseum built to accommodate 50,000 people. 108 musical societies united in forming a chorus of some 10,000 voices, and these, to the accompaniment of nearly 1,000 instruments, a battery of artillery, and anvils and bells, sang the favorite hymns and songs of America and the great patriotic chorals of the world. It was June, the city was filled with beautiful flowers, the singers of all the towns of New England gathered here, and the common wore the appearance of a great fair. No one who attended can ever forget Boston in those serene, fragrant, and bright June days. Another jubilee, at which the singers numbered nearly 20,000 and the instruments nearly 2,000, was held in 1872. On the evening of the 9th of November, 1872, a fire was discovered in a dry goods building on the corner of Kingston and Summer Streets. A cold wind was rising, and about 9 o'clock, the people were greatly excited to behold Summer Street, a wall of flame. In the night, the wind blew heavily, the flames spread in all directions, and the great granite warehouses seemed to melt before them like lead. It was Saturday night. The fire raged until Sunday noon. 65 acres, the center of the wholesale trade of the city, were covered with blackened heaps of ruin. 800 buildings were destroyed. The loss was estimated at $80 million. The fire was arrested at a point near the Old South Church. This historic building was saved by the heroic efforts of the firemen. The Old South stands. Loud through the still November air, the clang and clash of fire bells broke. From street to street, from square to square, rolled sheets of flame and clouds of smoke. The marble structures reeled and fell, the iron pillars bowed like lead. But one lone spire rang on its bell. Above the flames, men passed and said, "The Old South stands." The gold moon against a copper sky hung like a portent in the air. The midnight came, the wind rose high, and men stood speechless in despair. But as the marble columns broke, and wider grew the chasm red, a seething gulf of flame and smoke, the fireman marked the spire and said, "The Old South stands." Beyond the harbor, calm and fair, the sun came up through bars of gold, then faded in a wannish glare, as flame and smoke still upward rolled. The princely structures crowned with art, where commerce laid her treasures bare, the haunts of trade, the common mart, all vanished in the withering air. The Old South stands. The Old South must be leveled soon to check the flames and save the street, bring fuse and powder, but at noon the ancient fane still stood complete. The mitred flame had lipped the spire, the smoke its blackness o'er its cast. Then hero-like men fought the fire, and from each lip the watchword passed, "The Old South stands." All night the Red Sea round it rolled, and o'er it fell the fiery rain. And as each hour the old clock told, men said, "'Twill never strike again." But still the dial played at morn was crimsoned in the rising light. Long may it redden with the dawn, and mark the shading hours of night. Long may it stand. Long may it stand where God was sought, in weak and dark and doubtful days, where freedom's lessons first were taught, and prayers of faith were turned to praise. Where burned the first Shekinah's flame, in God's new temples of the free. Long may it stand in God's great name, like Israel's pillar by the sea. Long may it stand. On the 17th of June, 1875, occurred the centennial celebration of the Battle of Bunker Hill. It was one of the most imposing peace pageants ever seen in America. It also happily proved the occasion of a formal exchange of expressions of goodwill and renewed friendship between the representatives of the North and South.